If he can improve his hands, I think that greatly raises his floor and he could slide in as a fringe starter early in his career thanks to his route running, release, and size, and potentially lock down a long-term spot with the team. Hey y'all! It took a bit to get through all the receivers' grades, but we're finally going to get started going through the receivers in the 2025 NFL Draft. This year I'll be doing an in-depth evals of the top 50 receivers in this class. Similar to the running back series, I'm going to be breaking things up a little bit just to be able to avoid doing a 6-hour video, and we'll aim to upload a part about every other day again for the next few weeks. Also similar to the running back series, I'll be going through the receivers in alphabetical order by first name. So be sure you don't miss any other parts of wide receiver series or any other positional group series, be sure to subscribe. For this first part, I'll be covering Andrew Armstrong from Arkansas, Antwane Juice Wells from Ole Miss, Arian Smith from Georgia, Beaux Collins from Notre Dame, and Brennan Presley from Oklahoma State. So let's get this series started. Before going into any of the evals, I first want to go over how I grade the players since I think it'll make it a little bit easier to understand the grades and my rationale with some of the players. If you followed my work in previous seasons, there aren't too many changes I've made to my grading method for wide receivers, as I still grade based on their hands, jump ball and contested catch, body control and ball tracking, route running, release, yards after catch potential, future role, and athleticism or RAS score. For their hands, I grade players based on their hand technique and how reliable pass catchers they are. For their jump ball and contested catch, I grade based on how well they are able to make a play on the ball in the air, and how well they can convert on contested catch situations. For their body control and ball tracking, I grade on how well they're able to make tough body adjustments, as well as how big their catch radius is, and how well they can follow the ball close to a line of scrimmage through traffic and down the field. For route running, I grade based on the quality of their routes, the depth of their route tree, and how they do against zone coverage. For the release, I grade based on how they respond to press coverage, and even if they just have much, if any, experience against press coverage. For the yards after catch potential, I grade based on how athletic and fluid they are, as well as how well they follow their blocks to pick up big gains. For their future role, this is similar to my running back grading process for this same area, where there's essentially a summary of the player. So can they play inside and outside? Do they have good athleticism for the position? Are they a good run blocker? Can they handle NFL routes? And so on. For the athleticism or RAS score, this is slightly different than how I did it for the running back, since this is based on a graded scale depending on the RAS score. While I notice RAS score is not always aligning with success for running back prospects, I have seen a correlation for receivers, so I kept this the same. So the way it works is a player with a perfect 10 out of 10 for their RAS score will earn an A for this category. Then for every 0.5 reduction in their RAS score, the grade slightly drops. So a RAS score of 9.2 would be an A-, 8.7 would be a B+, 8.2 would be a B, and so on. Also, as a disclaimer, at the time of making this, we don't have all the athletic testing from pro days done, and I had to estimate some of their grades, so there might be some slight adjustments after the fact. Unfortunately, with a high number of players skipping athletic testing, they're also just players I just have to guess even after their pro days, so that's also why I figured, might as well go with some sort of estimate just to at least get some sort of baseline idea where they might be at. Once we have all those grades settled, we then get an average grade or a final score. So I know that was a lot of information, and some of this might be pretty straightforward, but just like the running back grading process, I just wanted to at least take the time to be able to go over this just to help. Also, a lot of overlap between some of the categories. These will be a little bit more condensed in terms of including information in similar sections. Now, I'll still bring the same level of detail, but it just won't be broken up as much as the running back series. But now let's finally get some evals and grades. Starting with one of the breakout stars of the SEC, Andrew Armstrong from Arkansas. Armstrong started his career at Texas A&M Commerce, which is an FCS school, not the Texas A&M and the SEC, and transferred to Arkansas for the 2023 season. He had a solid year in 2023, but had a great year in 2024 despite the poor quarterback play, earning 118 targets and converting those to 78 receptions for 1,140 yards, but surprisingly just a single touchdown. He did have 4 drops on the season, but with the high number of targets he had, he ended up with a good 4.9% drop rate. With his big frame, he did most of his damage outside with 90.7% of his snaps out wide and just 9.3% from the slot. Looking at his highlight games against Missouri, Texas, and Tennessee, he was productive in all these with nearly 10 targets in each game and at least 6 receptions each as well. His Texas game was the worst out of all of them, but he still finished with a good number of receptions with 6 receptions for 74 yards. For his other highlighted games, he had much more productive finishes with 9 receptions for 128 yards against Missouri and 9 receptions for 132 yards against Tennessee. Also, these were all competitive games too, so it wasn't like he was racking up sacks at the end of games and at the end of blowouts, and this was all against SEC teams' regular starters. For the rest of the season, he was incredibly consistent and productive, finishing with less than 70 receiving yards and less than 5 receptions in just one of his 11 games. That is incredibly impressive with the schedule he faced, and especially with the horrendous quarterback play he had to endure. So to see if there is talent behind those numbers, let's take a look at some of his grades. Starting with his hands, jump ball, contested catch, body control, and ball tracking, Armstrong really impressed me with the plays he can make downfield thanks to his body control. He has a big catch radius at his size and consistently extends out to make it too big for defenders to be able to cover it all. Also, he does a good job rising through contact to attack the ball before the defender has a chance to make a play on it. He also showed good ball tracking skills to be able to finish catches over his shoulders. His hands also stood out to me as they were very tough and capable of holding onto the balls in contested catch situations, leading to him converting on 62.1% of his contested catches in 2024. He also does a good job leveraging his long arms and frames to be able to box out defenders to make easier opportunities for him. Also, he does a really good job working back to the quarterback to make the throw easier on him, which was a necessity for his quarterback. Though his ball skills were impressive, there were times when he did seem a little bit slow at making his jump, which could lead to some missed opportunities. Hill seemed a little bit slow with his hands as well and wasn't always ready when the ball was thrown with more heat. Though he didn't often drop the ball in these situations, they did often lead to the ball slipping through his hands and having to trap it with his body. So Armstrong got off to a very good start with a B+ for his hands, A- for his jump ball and contested catch, and B+ for his body control and ball tracking. Moving to his route running and release, as a route runner he has room to grow, but he can make some clean cuts for a receiver his size. Also, he does a great job selling his vertical route to win on hitch routes. When he isn't faking going vertical and driving downfield, he is very comfortable stacking his defender to create a nice basket for his quarterback. He also showed some nice release skills with some quick footwork and good use of hand counters throughout the process. He also had good balance to get off a press and disengage from the defender. Now, while he did have some nice cuts, he did have a number of times when he seemed to lose his balance when trying to speed up his process. When he didn't have as much focus on the cut, he often took very rounded cuts that were easy for defenders to cover. The other issue I have with his cuts is that they just don't seem overly explosive and aren't always able to get him consistent separation. What makes his ability to separate sometimes even more challenging is the way that he would telegraph his routes. He often has a pretty straightforward rhythm, which better defenders were able to read. His routes are also sometimes easy to read due to running a somewhat limited route tree. It seemed like he primarily ran a lot of vertical, drag, slant, and hitch routes. In those routes, he could also sometimes struggle to establish leverage and didn't do a good job using tempo. Also, I was disappointed in his ability to read zone coverage. I often found him drifting towards defenders instead of settling into an opening. Also, he seemed to lack the great awareness of when to break off his route when the play broke down or if the quarterback scrambled. I think he also is a little bit more limited in his release than I want to admit. While he had some good success, he also seemed to have a pretty limited release package, which some corners were able to sniff out and gave him fits when they predicted his move. He also sometimes just relies on his body strength and frame to be able to push through the defender and doesn't clear cleanly. So things got a bit worse for Armstrong with just a C for his route running, but rebounded pretty well with a B for his release. For his yards after catch potential, future role and athleticism were RAS. He showed good balance after the catch as he was often able to withstand arm tackles. Also, he showed good peripheral vision to have his base set to withstand initial contact, leading to a smooth transition into a runner. As a runner, he was able to show good vision to take the most optimal path, and did a good job keeping his legs moving to be able to pick up a few extra yards after initial contact. As for how he can fit into the NFL, it's very easy to see his ball skills and athleticism translating to the NFL. He has great size and ability to make plays on the balls, which could at worst turn him into a red zone weapon and an impossible vertical weapon. The thing is, I just worry if he can be as consistent in the NFL as he was in college. His route running isn't quite there yet, and he's fairly predictable to college players, which means NFL players will likely very easily read his routes. If that is the case, it can be tough sledding for Armstrong to get meaningful starter snaps and have a significant impact on offense. Also, though he does bring some nice power and balance with the ball in his hands after the catch, he's a slow accelerator and lacks great top speed, which limits his ability to get bigger gains after the catch. Also, he has a little wiggle to be able to make defenders miss and sometimes seems a bit stiff. He can struggle with his ability to change direction and doesn't have the curvilinear movement that great athletes have to be able to help to navigate around defenders and pick up extra yards. So things got a bit rough again with a C for his yards after catch potential, a C+ for his future role. However, he did test well at the combine, which did earn him a B for his athleticism or RAS. As a summary of Armstrong's strengths, he has very good catch radius at his size and with the ball skills to be able to help him be a quarterback's best friend. What could also help that happen is his tough hands, since that helps nearly any ball thrown to his direction usually end up as a reception, which could also lead to weekly production. Also, he has some solid release fundamentals, which that along with his good feel of how to stack defenders, could help him continue to work from the outside and be a good deep threat. He also has quick feet in both his release and his cuts, which could also lend to a player who is also able to get it done in the short and intermediate parts of the field as well. That being said, he did look a little bit stiff after the catch, as he could struggle making quick change of direction moves and had trouble making defenders miss. He also sometimes had a few lapses in his ball tracking, which led to a few mistimed jumps and ball attacks, which he'll have to clean up if he wants to become a red zone weapon and a deep threat. He may be pigeonholed into that type of role since a number of his routes are typically easy to read by college defenders, which means that it'll likely be easier for NFL defenders to read and jump his routes as well if they're underneath. He can also struggle beating zone, which may further limit his consistency in the NFL. What could also disrupt his consistency is the ability to beat press coverage. While he often had good success in college, I do wonder how he'll hold up in the NFL since he can be a bit uncreative against press and needs to have a more diverse release package to ensure he can regularly beat it and get open in the NFL. So by taking the average of all his grades, Armstrong earned a 2.83 out of 4, which puts him in my good role player tier. Armstrong really stood out to me when I saw him in the background watching Arkansas running back Jaquindon Jackson, and I'm a sucker for tall, lanky receivers, so I was expecting him to be a big sleeper of mine. Unfortunately, the closer I looked, the more holes I saw that did concern me at the next level. I think he does have the makings of a good role player, but I'm not certain he has what it takes to be able to contribute past that consistently. If he had more athletic ability or more polished route running, I'd be more confident in his lasting impact in the NFL. However, I do worry that between his lack of great athleticism and route running deficits, he will struggle to separate consistently in NFL and be limited to being a jump ball specialist or maybe even a vertical guy. This is a role for players in the NFL, but can be a hard one to earn a living doing if you don't have a quarterback who can pull off those throws. As for Andrew Armstrong's comp, I have Brandon LaFell as his comp. Both are good at stacking their defenders despite not having overpowering athletic ability. Also, both have big frames and tough hands to be an easy target. Also, both can pull off impressive body adjustments to off-target throws and have some solid release skills to give themselves more of a chance to be successful on the outside in the NFL. However, neither have great athletic ability to be big contributors after the catch and may have less success on deep shots. Also, both can come off as limited route runners, which could make things a little bit more difficult for them to regularly contribute. Both can also come off as a bit stiff in their cuts, which can make them a little bit easier to stop as well. While LaFell wasn't great, he did have productive years as a contributor on offenses he was on. I think it's possible for Armstrong to do the same thing. The big thing for him is to ensure he's able to maintain his success against press and take a step forward as a route runner to overcome some athletic limitations. Moving on to our next receiver, Antwane Juice Wells Jr. from Ole Miss. Start with a look at his basic stats. It was a pretty disappointing year for Wells. He had just 56 targets for 28 receptions, 553 yards, and 6 touchdowns. He also unfortunately had nearly as many drops as touchdowns with 5 drops on the year for a really bad 15.2% drop rate. Also this season he did a lot of his damage on the outside again, as he has done in previous seasons. For his highlight games against Georgia, Oklahoma, and South Carolina, he had pretty underwhelming performances, failing to get more than 3 receptions in these games, and only getting more than 40 yards against South Carolina in these highlighted games, which also happened just because he got a 66-yard reception that did most of the heavy lifting for his work to finish that game. Throughout the rest of the season, he struggled to get more consistent work, with him getting more than 5 targets in only 3 of his 13 games, and more than 3 receptions in just 1 of his 13. His yardage was solid, but if he excluded the first 4 games this season against non-SEC opponents, he only got more than 50 yards in 2 of his final 7 games, and more than 60 in just the South Carolina game. So his production was really rough, but let's take a look at some of his grades to see if there's more at play here. For his hands, jump ball, contested catch, body control, and ball tracking, he consistently caught the ball away from his body and had good time with his ball attacks. He's also capable of making some last-second adjustments and can make strong catches away from his range to help expand his catch radius. Also, he does show some good awareness to use his frame to box out defenders to make easier opportunities for 50-50 balls. Unfortunately, he just had a lot of lapses in his hand technique and ball tracking. That led to his high number of drops with a 15.2% drop rate, limited success in contested catch situations at just 25% success rate in contested catches for 2024, and just overall not being a very effective receiver or pass catcher. So due to his lapses, Wells has a rough start with just a C- for his hands, C+ for his jump ball and contested catch rate, but at least redeems himself with a B for his body control and ball tracking. For his route running and release, I know I usually start with positives for these, but there's just not a whole lot that I feel comfortable pointing to. He's just such a raw prospect despite the number of years he's been in school. His route running was the most frustrating things to see, as it's just so underdeveloped right now. His eye for openings against zone coverage is not where it should be given his experience, and he runs such a limited route tree with such little nuance to his routes. When he does try to use some stem fakes and stutter steps, they're usually pretty ineffective. He also doesn't make sharp cuts and often just resorts to rushed, rounded cuts. That contributed to him having difficulties getting separation and often just tries to win with his size and strength. What also led to those issues were his struggles establishing leverage and disengaging from physical coverage and press. Speaking of the ability to beat press, his release is also really raw as well. He lacks creativity with his feet and lacks good use of his arms. His foot speed especially is concerning, as it can often look slow and lack urgency to clear defenders. That led to him more than often just relying on his strength to plow through defenders to try to get out on his route. So things continue to go in the wrong direction for Wells, with him earning just a D for his route running and release. But he was really hyped up during his college career for his athleticism, so maybe things will get better with his yards after catch and athleticism or RAS, right? For his yards after catch potential, future role in athleticism or RAS, he still has some nice physicality and athleticism to him, despite his poor combine performance. That ability shows after he makes the catch with good contact balance and power to withstand arm tackles. Also, he runs a good pad level to at least finish his catches falling forward, even when he isn't able to cleanly break the tackle to be able to pick up a few extra yards. He has a quick transition upfield after making the catch and runs with good vision to use his blocks and pick up yards. I have seen some complaints about his effort based on the effort he showed after the catch, but I don't think his deficits are effort related. His blocking makes me feel more confident his issues aren't an effort-related situation, since he's a quality blocker who is always looking to pick up a block and help clear an opening for his teammate. Also, he blocks with good base and has good hand placement to hold his block. The problem with Wells is trying to figure out what his fit in the NFL is. While he has good contact balance and vision, those aren't really big requirements for receivers and aren't major factors in playing time or success. Also, being a quality blocker is nice, but it's kind of the same thing where it won't really earn you playing time. Then we look at how he actually operates as a receiver, and it's pretty underwhelming. So I just have a hard time figuring out what a team would really look to get out of him that they couldn't get out of a more talented player or a more truly athletic player. So things do get a little bit better with Wells earning a B for his yards after catch potential, but go downhill again, earning just a C- for his future role and D+ for his athleticism or RAS. As for a summary of his strengths, he does a good job extending his arms for catches and making tough adjustments to give him a good catch radius and make him a bit more of an appealing target. Also, he has some good traits after the catch despite the poor combine performance, but good contact balance and solid vision to pick up extra yards. Finally, he is at least willing to bring it as a blocker to try to help his teammates even if he isn't able to help through the air as much. The unfortunate thing is that he just isn't able to help the team too often through the air due to lapses in his hand technique, which led to a high number of drops. Also, he really struggles to establish leverage in his routes and has a limited route tree which further reduces his consistent impact he can have. His release skills also don't make things much better. He can struggle to clear press and make it questionable if he can even be an outside receiver. Finally, after these past few years being heralded as an athletic freak, he really disappointed his combine testing, which may be the final nail in his coffin in his hopes of being drafted. So by taking the average of all his grades, Wells earned just a 1.87 out of 4, which puts him in my likely not worth rostering tier. It's just kind of hard for me to be overly optimistic about Wells' outlook. He's such a raw player with good, not great size, has average at best athleticism, and is an older prospect. That just very rarely is a combination that leads to a successful NFL career at any position. Maybe he finds a way to recapture his 2022 magic, but his 2024 tape makes me want to look elsewhere if a team is looking to add a young receiver this draft. As for a comp, I have Eric Izukanma as Wells' comp. Both have a solid, not great size, but can bring some physicality to position. Both also have a big catch radius and have some very good yards after catch ability. However, neither are great creators after the catch, and also lack great top speed to pick up extra yards. Both can also have lapses in their hands and are raw route runners. Both also struggle to release and shaking physical coverage. Izukanma was taken higher than expected with plans for him to be a project and a possible Deebo Samuel Light player for Miami. However, things haven't exactly panned out well since he's just too raw to trust playing him as a traditional receiver role. I have concerns the same could happen to Wells and fear that he's likely going to have trouble sticking to a roster based on his 2024 tape. Moving to our next receiver, Arian Smith from Georgia. Smith had a modest year from a reception standpoint with 72 targets for 48 receptions. That being said, with how poor Georgia's pass catchers were in 2024, Smith easily led the team in receiving yards with 817 yards for the season. Also, he managed to get 4 touchdowns as well. Unfortunately, he did have a lot of drops with 10 on the season for a horrendous 17.2% drop rate. His drop rate is actually so high that it's nearly the same as his slot snap share, as he played 20.4% of his snaps from the slot and 79.4% from outside. For his highlight games, I picked his Notre game, the Texas rematch in the SEC championship game, and Alabama games. These were actually some of his more productive games with 8 targets against Texas and 10 against Alabama. Unfortunately, he didn't do much with them against Texas with just 5 receptions for 41 yards, but did manage to put up a good 6 receptions for 132 yards and a touchdown against Alabama, which is impressive. What wasn't as impressive was him having a drop against Texas and 2 against Alabama, which shows that when he does get more volume, the risk of drops will be there. Then we have the opposite, where he gets very little volume against Notre Dame, which is a single target and a reception, but for an albeit good 67 yards. So we have another case of a player seemingly disappointing from a stat perspective, so let's take a look to see if his grades suggest that there is a good player hidden behind these stats. For his hands, jump ball, contested catch, body control, and ball tracking, he can show some potential as a pass catcher, as he can sometimes make some really impressive body adjustments and get his hands on balls away from his frame. Unfortunately, he often isn't able to deliver when he gets his hand on the ball since he catches it with such inconsistent hand technique and seems delayed at getting his hands ready at times. He lacked great focus to secure catches, which led to him having those 10 drops, which was by far the most of any Power 4 conference player and resulted in that 17.2% drop rate, which is dreadful. He was also very poor in contested catch opportunities with a success rate of just 22.2% for 2024 and 16.7% for his entire career. A major cause of his lack of success in those situations is his lack of arm extensions when making a play on the ball. He was just way too passive when catching the ball, letting it come to him, which invited opportunities for defenders to make a play on the ball. He also lacked concentration and tough hands to consistently finish those catches, even when he did get his hands on the ball with some time to prepare for a hit. I think another issue for both these situations and his drops in general was an issue with his ball tracking. It seems like he would often have the ball sneak up on him, which led to him not having his hands ready. I just really like to see him be a bit more prepared and even rise up and attack the ball more frequently. So Smith had a very bad start with a D+ for his hands, D for his jump ball and contested catch, and C for his body control and ball tracking. For his route running and release, he does have some potential against press thanks to his quick feet. Other than that though, I don't know, man. Right now he just tries to win with speed and often runs sloppy routes with very rounded cuts and no nuance. He also showed poor awareness of finding openings and zone coverage. Also, his small frame led to him getting pushed around a lot in his routes, including being pushed to the ground on a number of occasions. That difficulty with physicality also showed in his release skills. He often just didn't have much of a plan of how to beat press and often just tried to run around his defender. When the defender did get their hands on him, he had weak arm counters and delayed feet which caused him to be swallowed up by press at times. He just really has a hard time responding to physical coverage and press, which just isn't a great sign if he's trying to make it in the NFL. So things didn't get much better for Smith with a D+ for his route running and release. But like Wells, maybe things will get better in the next section thanks to his athleticism. For his yards after catch potential, future role in athleticism or RAS, there's at least one player every year who has a track background, and Arian Smith is this year's winner. He enrolled at Georgia as a two-sport athlete competing in track his first year in college. After that, he focused on football but brought his speed from track onto the football field. His weapon after the catch had a very quick transition and acceleration that helped pick up yards very quickly. Also, he showed some great vision on screen plays and even showed the ability to hug his blocks and squeeze through tight creases. In general, he was at his best out in motion when he would be able to get a running start and be protected from press. Also, despite having a small frame, he wasn't deterred from helping as a blocker as he was always willing to put in a good effort and has active feet to help hold his block. While he might be able to get a crack in the NFL thanks to his athleticism, he needs to use more than just his athleticism after the catch. In college, he typically just tried to outrun defenders instead of using moves to make them miss in open space, which limited his big play potential. Finally, while he is a willing blocker, his small frame caused him to have a poor anchor. So with all that, he kind of just is a speedy but unreliable weapon. If he had good hands, I think he could carve out a role, but with so many drops, it's just hard to see a team being willing to feel like he's talented enough to be able to deal with those headaches. So we finally get a positive grade for Smith with a B for his yards after catch potential, but things do unfortunately come back to reality with a C in his future role, but then do shoot up again with an A- for athleticism or RAS. For a summary of his strengths, he has elite athleticism, particularly with his speed, which helps him be a big threat after the catch. He also has great vision in open space, which helps him hit the home run if he's able to get the blocking in front of him. His athleticism could also one day help him in other areas and help him improve his release skills to help more as a pass catcher. Also, he does show good flashes of being a very capable receiver, some tough catches away from his frame that he can sometimes make if he's able to pull that together more frequently. Unfortunately, while he can make some tough catches, he has trouble finishing the easy catches due to inconsistent hands and lapses in ball tracking. He also struggles to consistently finish contested catches, which makes it hard to trust him anytime the ball is thrown his direction. He is also a pretty sloppy route runner, which makes it really questionable if he's able to contribute on anything more than screen and design throws in the NFL. Finally, he has a lot of struggles against physical coverage as well as pressure, which will only get worse in the NFL. So by taking the average of all his grades, Smith earned just a 1.95 out of 4, which also puts him at a likely not worth rostering tier. Some people thought I was over-exaggerating when I said Carson Beck had the potentially the worst supporting class of the top quarterbacks this season. However, I feel that their top receiver, Arian Smith, scoring this low really shows how poor this group was. Regardless, I just find it hard to see Smith as much more than a role player on design touches and as a special teams player. He's just so raw and has such a slender build that he just doesn't look ready for NFL action. Plus his hands are just way too unreliable to be able to trust him. As for a comp, I have Anthony Schwartz as his comp. Both have background in track which shows with their speed. Both also have good ability to contribute after the catch and run with the ball with good vision. Unfortunately, both are very raw players who lack the ball skills to be reliable pass catchers. Also, both have more thin builds, which creates more of a challenge for them in the NFL with more physical players. Schwartz unfortunately doesn't look like he's going to pan out in the NFL, and I have a hard time seeing Smith do any better. The best thing that Smith can do right now is to focus on cleaning up his hands and work on his return skills to try to earn a roster spot as a special teams return player. Moving to our next receiver, and one I'm more excited about, Beaux Collins from Notre Dame. Starting with a look at his stats, he didn't get a ton of volume due to Notre Dame's tendency to run the ball and control the clock, which led to him getting just 64 targets for 41 receptions, 490 yards, and 3 touchdowns. What unfortunately was high though, despite his low volume, was his drops, with 7 drops on the year for a poor drop rate of 14.6%. Also with his taller build, he played the majority of snaps from the outside, but did play 19% of his snaps from the slot. For his highlight games against Ohio State, Georgia, and Texas A&M, all were pretty underwhelming from a stat perspective, especially when you compare to some of the other top prospects. But again, Notre Dame's limited passing attack did play a role in that. Regardless, he did struggle to get very many targets, only getting more than 5 in just the Texas A&M games in these highlighted games, and only managed to get more than 5 targets in 4 of his 16 games throughout the whole season, which is very disappointing. His reception totals also weren't much better, failing to get more than 5 receptions in any game this season. So, pretty uninspiring player, but as I mentioned, I am excited to talk about Collins, so let's take a look at his grades to find out why. For his hands, jump ball, contested catch, body control, and ball tracking, he has a big catch radius at his size. He's capable of making some really tough adjustments, even showed good awareness on our sidelines to keep his feet in bounds. He also does a good job working back to the quarterback, which helped him be successful in contested catch situations. With that habit, his long arms, and his tough hands, he converted on 60% of his opportunities in contested catch situations in 2024, and 52.2% throughout his entire career. So with a contested catch rate that high, he must have fantastic hands, right? Well, not exactly. This is the most frustrating part for me with Collins, since he does the hard part of making contested catches, but fails to finish the easy catches, with drops littered throughout all his film. Like I said, he had that high drop rate of 14.6%, and the worst thing is that these drops aren't a single issue for him for this season, since he has a career average drop rate of 13.2%. On top of that, he never even had a drop rate lower than 11.6%, which is really hard to do for that many years that he's been in school. His hands just seem too slow at times, and his hand technique is very inconsistent. I found his hand technique when making catches at or below his waist especially troublesome, as he often struggles to decide how he wanted to go after the ball, and often just had really sloppy catch attempt. The indecision also led to a high number of unnecessary body catches, and the indecision may have also played a part in some of his delay in adjusting the balls, which led to some missed opportunities. So Collins has a rough start with a D+ for his hands, but rebounds nicely with a B for his jump ball and contested catch, and B+ for his body control and ball tracking. For his route running and release, this is where Collins really starts to shine to me. He has a variety of moves in his release that all have good timing with his upper and lower body to help him get consistent separation at the start of his route. He knows how to use his foot speed and timing to get defenders off balance, and use effective arm counters to help clear their press attempts. He just looks so confident and in control in his release, and that release ability could lend him to being a good jump ball specialist thanks to his early separation that he can in the red zone, and his taller frame and ball skills that can also help him earn a role like this in the NFL. He's also a talented route runner who has experience running a full route tree and can use tempo and stem fakes in his routes. Also, he does a good job stacking his defender to get some vertical ability. He also shows some ability to be able to play in the slot and outside with a good mix of snaps at both. Now, while he can get some initial separation thanks to his release, defenders can also unfortunately close that gap very quickly due to his lack of great athleticism. He also just lacks burst in his cuts and doesn't have enough hip sync to make sharp cuts, which further helps his defenders. Also, he often needed a few extra steps to gather himself when he was trying to go for sharper cuts. He could also sometimes win leverage early on in his routes, but instantly would give it up due to losing track of his defender. He could also sometimes win leverage early in his routes, but could instantly give it up due to losing track of his defender. I also like to see him sell his vertical a little bit more to help his underneath routes to be more successful. He also often struggled to separate vertically due to a lack of top speed as well. So we have another good set of grades with a solid B- for his route running, and an A- for his release, which is actually the highest I have for the entire receiver class. For his yards after catch potential, future role, and athleticism or RAS, with his release and route running, I do think there is a very visible path of him becoming a jump ball specialist for a team. I think that ability should at least secure him a roster spot and potentially get him some early playing time. The problem is, I just worry how his hands are going to hold up, as they're just way too unreliable, and that could cause him opportunities. On top of that, he's not very athletic both from a top speed and dynamic perspective. His lack of speed ends up giving up the advantage he earned early on with his release and route running, as I mentioned before. He also lacks wiggle in open space, which stops him from evading tackles. So at best, he might be able to become a quality jump ball player who can contribute underneath thanks to his release. However, at worst, he is a guy who might be able to be unable to separate, drops a lot of his targets, and provides little to nothing after the catch. So, big spectrum of outcomes. But I do think his hands are fixable despite his struggles throughout his career. If he can improve his hands, I think that greatly raises his floor, and he could slide in as a fringe starter early in his career thanks to his route running, release, and size, and potentially lock down a long-term spot with a team. So we have a bit more of a somber finish for Collins, with C+ in his yards after catch potential and future role. For athleticism or RAS, he hasn't completed athletic testing at the time of recording this, so I ended up having to estimate a B for him for his athleticism or RAS. I understand that he likely isn't the greatest athlete, but size does also go into the equation, which can often carry that grade. Maybe that's a bit generous, but I've just seen that happen a lot with less than stellar athletes who just happen to be big athletes. For a summary of his strengths, he has likely the best release package in his class, and has a lot of experience running a diverse route tree, which will both help him in his transition to the NFL. Also, he shows some good nuance in his route running and some really impressive flashes of tough body adjustments to balls, which gives him hope to be able to be a good surprise for a team. Also, he did show some good versatility with experience in the slot and outside, which could help him earn a role with the team if he'd prefer to use him as a big slot, since he does have the route running to be able to handle that task. However, he can show all the promise he wants, but if he isn't catching the ball, it doesn't really matter. It also won't matter if he's unable to separate from more athletic defenders due to his lack of speed and his cuts lacking great burst. Those limitations also showed with minimal ability to contribute after the catch, which further limits his upside. Finally, though he does have a big frame, I feel like he could have used it more to win consistently as well and play up to his size. So by taking the average of all his grades, Collins earned a 2.71 out of 4, which puts him in my may have a future role tier. While Collins is a very good player in a lot of areas and a great player particularly in his release, he is also a very troubling player in key areas that will likely hold him back from a bigger role in the NFL. First, his hands are inexcusable and will be a rate limiting step to him earning playing time. Even if his hands improve, he still needs to be able to take a step forward as a route runner to improve his ability to separate, since NFL defenders will likely blanket him like college players sometimes could due to his lack of athleticism. So those are just very big barriers for him that I fear will be too large for Collins to overcome. So there's just a lot of big barriers that I feel will be too big for Collins to be able to overcome. As for a comp, I have Tajae Sharpe as Collins' comp. Both have good size but more slender frames with some experience playing inside and outside. Also both show some good route running fundamentals and release skills. Also both lack great athleticism to ensure they can get consistent separation and have limited success after the catch. Sharpe may represent a safer version of Collins since he had more reliable hands, but I think he shows that Collins can become a solid contributor like Sharpe was early in his career. The big thing is he needs to finally take a step forward with his hands and be able to be more reliable as a target. Moving to our last receiver for this part, Brennan Presley from Oklahoma State. Starting with a look at his basic stats, they start out looking amazing with a ridiculous 131 targets and 90 receptions, which makes you go, holy crap, this guy must be a stud. Then you see the 767 yards for his season, which translates to just an 8.5 yards per reception, and things get a lot less exciting all of a sudden. That being said, him finishing with 7 touchdowns and just 3 drops, which equals out to a great 3.3% drop rate, is encouraging. For snap distribution, we start to see the reason why he had fewer yards per reception, with the majority of snaps coming from the slot, which likely will be where he needs to play at the NFL with a frame of 5'8", 175 pounds. Looking at his highlight games against Colorado, BYU, and Kansas State, we can get similar reactions to his Colorado game with 14 targets for 8 receptions, but just finishing with a measly 42 yards. His BYU game was fine and nothing special with just 5 receptions for 43 yards and 7 targets, but his Kansas State game was at least a lot better with 13 targets for 6 receptions and 70 yards. Now you'd probably want more production when you get 13 targets, but the yardage was at least much better than his other highlighted games. The concerning thing for his yardage though is that nearly a quarter of all his receiving yards came against Baylor. So if we remove that game, things get a lot more concerning for him. However, see if we're overanalyzing his stats, let's take a look at some of his grades. For his hands, jump ball, contested catch, body control, and ball tracking, while he wasn't used downfield too frequently, he has good ball skills to help downfield as he typically has good timing with his ball attacks and showed the ability to make catches over his shoulders. He's also able to slightly expand his catch radius by making adjustments to poorly placed balls. Also, he has very reliable hands, consistently catching the ball away from his body to expand his catch radius. That being said, I do still have concerns about him consistently helping downfield as he seems to sometimes have some lapses in his ball tracking down the field. At times he can sometimes have a bit of an unnecessary hop or skip when making the catch, which at first I thought he was just trying to high point the ball, but it seemed more like he just had a hard time tracking the ball and went up to get it unnecessarily. So Pressley started out red hot with an A- for his hands, but cooled off quick with a C+ for his jump ball and contested catch, and B- for his body control and ball tracking. For his route running and release, he's a very effective route runner on short routes with quick, concise footwork to get consistent separation. He does a really good job with his approach and breaks down to make quick cuts and makes himself an available target for the quarterback. He also knows how to make himself an available target against zone with a great eye to quickly identify openings and settle in them before the defense has time to react. Also, though he definitely specialized in short routes and his ADOT didn't significantly increase in 2024, it did seem like he ran more routes downfield this year. That being said, he just has minimal ability to be able to beat press outside of winning with his foot speed due to his frame. His frame also led to issues with him struggling to disengage from physical coverage if the defender got their hands on him as well. That struggle caused him to be redirected if defenders were able to play him close. Also, when defenders were close on pass attempts, they could often overpower him on the attempt to the ball and break it up. Part of the issue why he could be overpowered was to obviously his frame, but also due to just having the best athleticism. He doesn't have the best vertical ability, which could cause limitations in his already small catch radius. Also, his speed and burst are just average, which limits his vertical ability and doesn't leave much room for error if he is slow to react to a ball. Finally, though he did run more routes downfield, the results were still pretty disappointing with an incredibly low ADOT of just 5.8 for 2024 and 6.6 for his entire career. He runs such a limited route tree that was primarily just slants and out routes. It's kind of crazy if you go watch any of his highlights, since typically highlight videos contain players making deep catches downfield, However, his are just slant after slant after slant, and then some out routes thrown in to kind of mix it up a little bit, but just a lot of repetition there. So Pressley earned just a B- for his route running due to his limited route tree, and just a D for his release, which is one of the lowest release grades for this entire class. For his yards after catch potential, future role, and athleticism or RAS, after making the catch, he does a good job of starting to get some forward momentum right as he catches the ball to maximize the yards he can gain after the catch. He also showed really good vision to find the best path and knew how to use his blocks in open space. He had good acceleration and change of direction ability to navigate around his blocks and maximize his opportunities. While he may not be overpowering through any tackle attempts at his size, he did have very good acceleration and change of direction ability to pick up extra yards. Also, he has very good timing with his cuts to help him be a little bit more slippery despite his smaller size. That being said, while he does have good movement skills, he likely lacks the top speed to be able to get more than a few extra yards. Also, he's just so limited to the slot, which will cause him to fall down draft boards. It's fine to be a slot specialist, but his limited route tree concerns me of how much above being a quick hitter type of slot guy he's capable of becoming. While those players are okay, they often offer little impact for NFL offenses and less likely to be used due to NFL quarterbacks having more of a downfield emphasis than college quarterbacks. So Pressley earned a solid B for his yards after catch potential, but then just a C for his future role, and a C- for his athleticism or RAS. For a summary of his strengths, he has very reliable hands and has the ability to slightly expand his catch radius by going up for balls. He also shows good eye against zone coverage, which will be a necessity for him to be able to continue to play from this slot. After the catch, he does show some good solid skills with great vision and being shifty and slippery to make him hard to square up and take down at times. However, he's just a very limited player, which shows with his poor career ADOT and limited route tree. He also really struggles to hold up against physical coverage, and he's unable to hold up against press at his frame, which will likely keep him to the slot in the NFL. Finally, while he is very quick and shifty, he has average top speed and poor explosiveness, which will further limit him in the NFL and could be a big thing that holds him back from being a regular contributor on big plays. So by taking the average of all his grades, Pressley earned a 2.37 out of 4, which puts him in my needs improvement to contribute tier. The NFL likely has already unfortunately signaled what they think of Pressley by not inviting him to the combine. If there is a silver lining of hope, while he is a limited player, he is excellent at those specific things. If there is a team looking for a slot exclusive player who can get separation on slant and out routes, it's hard to find a better option. However, that's such a niche role that I find it hard that he'll be able to earn a roster spot and get playing time with those limitations at his size. As for a comp, I have Kiki Cootie as his comp. Both are smaller players who are very effective on short routes and can get yards after making the reception. Also, both are capable of making adjustment to balls to slightly expand their catch radius and have a good eye for zone coverage to help them be more successful as slot players. However, both do have small frames which will likely limit them to the slot. Also, both have a very limited route tree, which makes it hard for them to contribute on a regular basis. Both also struggle to finish catches through contact due to being overpowered and don't have elite athleticism to overcome their shortcomings. Cootie had a relatively short NFL career, but did have some moments early on in his career when he looked like a contributor. If Pressley is lucky, maybe he will go to a similar situation to start his career and make more of a lasting impact than Cootie did. And that's all for the first set of receivers. Let me know what your thoughts are on all the receivers in the comments and who you think I'm too high or too low on. As I mentioned before, this is just part 1 of 10, so there will be several more evals being done over the next few weeks. So be sure you don't miss any of them, be sure to subscribe. While you're at it, like the video as it would help the channel and the series grow thanks to you. Speaking of helping the channel, I just want to give a huge thank you to everyone who's supported me so far. I feel like I was just thanking everyone for the support back on my Will Howard video when this channel hit 100 subscribers, and now it just hit 200 subscribers, which I never thought could ever happen. I know that number is pretty insignificant when you look around the big landscape and look around at the bigger sports channels, but again, I truly never thought I could get to this point where I have this many followers here. So it truly does mean a lot to me, and it keeps me motivated in the grind of trying to get these players evaluated and these videos out. So thank you all so much, and see you all next time.